Hiya everyone! Today's book is a classic. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. It's considered a classic and I've never read anything by her before, so this was my first. So I was kind of excited about it. It was actually written in 1969, so it's been around for a minute. It is considered her first autobiography. I'm not sure if it's the first book she's ever written or not. She's written a ton. And this is only up until age 20. So she has a lot that happens to her before she's 20 years old. So basically it is just a bunch of short stories. They're chapters, but they're not really chapters. Some of them are a couple paragraphs or a couple pages, and then some are like 10 pages. So it just depends on the story that she's telling. So I don't really know anything about her. I didn't know anything about her until I read this, and I still haven't really done much research on her yet. But she was born in California, and her parents divorced. She has an older brother who's only a couple years older. Her parents divorced and then wanted to send her and her brother to live in Arkansas with their grandma. So they're in California, and they hire this person to travel with them to take them to Arkansas. Right. So they're paying this guy to take them to Arkansas. They get to Arizona, and he decides that's all the farther he's going. He has somewhere else to be. So he stops in Arizona, and these two kids, she's like 3, I believe, and the brother is maybe like 6 or 7 or 8, not very much older. So from Arizona to Arkansas, they traveled by themselves. Yeah, crazy. So they lived in Arkansas with Mama, they called her Grandma, for a while, and then Dad came around to visit and ended up taking them to St. Louis, where now Mom was living, their real mom was living. So they stayed there for a while, came back to Arkansas, and then ended up in San Francisco. Well, I'll say California, because they were in San Francisco and then to Los Angeles and then back, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but it ends in San Francisco, so it takes place a couple different places. So a couple of the stories that were the most interesting, I thought, or most pertinent to the book, I think she was 8. This was when she was in St. Louis. Mom's boyfriend molested her, which of course is super sad and all that. But she didn't realize what was happening or why it was wrong. So the boyfriend kept saying, "If you tell anyone what we did," and she's like, what did we do? What happened? So my understanding is that there wasn't much like physical affection up until that point. There wasn't a lot of hugging, that sort of thing. So she was happy to have someone just like touch her and hold her, and she like yearned for that after that point. So after the molestation happened, he ignored her for like weeks, months on end. He just acted like she didn't exist in the house. And so she's like 7 or 8 years old, not paying attention to her, and she's just like distraught. She's upset, she's disappointed, she wants his attention, and she can't get it. So finally she gets over it, and then what happens one random day, he rapes her. Long story short, she ends up having to go to court to testify against him. So there's that story, and then she talks a lot about the repercussions of the rape and the trauma. It wasn't known as trauma back then, but the trauma that had like subsided in her and what had happened after that, like how she felt. And then I'm not sure the timeline, but she eventually went back to Arkansas, and then the trauma followed her, of course. So she talks about that and like why people thought that she was acting so different when she got back there. So yeah. Okay, so one other story, strange, when she was in Los Angeles, I believe, I can't remember, she basically ran away from her dad. She was visiting her dad, and she ran away to get away from him, and she ended up living in a junkyard for a month. like there was a bunch of other teens that were living there, and she slept in this car, and it didn't seem like anyone was even out looking for her. So I thought that was interesting. Another story says she went to Mexico with her dad for a party, and he ended up like drunk, got wasted, and she didn't want to stay the night there. So she's like, I'm driving us back. She's, I think, like 14, 15. She's like, I'm driving us back. She's never driven a car before, and it's stick shift. And she drives it over 50 miles to get to the border, gets to the border, and then gets in a fender bender with another car. So there's that. My thoughts on this book. I didn't think I was gonna like it when I started it. It just took me a minute to get used to her style and to like get to know her personality. And it starts out, she's really young, so there isn't a lot of like really funny moments or things like that, but she is very witty and she has this very subtle humor. So if you're not paying attention to it, you'll miss it. So you have to pay attention to the book. You can't just like read it to read. So one of the stories, let me find it. Okay. So one example I think of her humor is towards the end. She talks about like wanting to have sex for the first time, and she picks a guy that she knows, and she's like, okay, we're gonna do it. So she says, she asks the guy, would you like to have a sexual intercourse with me? And things were going according to plan. She says, take me somewhere. And he says, you mean you're gonna give me some? And her response, well, her thought to this was, I assured him that was exactly what I was about to give him. Even as the scene was being enacted, I realized the imbalance in his values. He thought I was giving him something, and the fact of the matter was that it was my intention to take something from him. So things like that. Her humor is very subtle, which I really appreciated, especially as she got older, because you could see it start to come out a little more. So I really like that. And one of the biggest themes of the book is racism and segregation. And this was in the 40s. Hello, Ring. This takes place in like the 40s, 50s, or 30s, 40s, something like that. So, of course, like that racism is rampant at that time. Feelings and thoughts of inferiority, but there's also a lot of like pride in the culture, pride in her color, pride in the family. So there's like that dichotomy too. So it's both sad and uplifting at the same time, which I really enjoyed. Specifically, like how she handled certain situations. Like she didn't let things really bother her, but she would voice like how she felt about them. So another story, little paragraph that I thought was really good, that really like caught my attention. This is when she was in San Francisco. And she says, a story went the rounds about a San Francisco white matron who refused to sit beside a Negro civilian on the streetcar, even after he made room for her on the seat. Her explanation was that she would not sit beside a draft dodger who was a Negro as well. So this was during the war, World War II. She added that at least he could do was fight for his country the way her son was fighting on Iwo Jima. The story said that the man pulled his body away from the window to show an armless sleeve. He said quietly and with great dignity, then ask your son to look around for my arm, which I left over there. Wow, I thought that story was very poignant and just goes to show the time that this takes place and how prevalent racism was. So I thought it was really good. I'm glad I read this book finally. It took me a long time. I don't think I would have been able to appreciate it though if I was younger. So I'm glad I waited to read it. So there is I think she has a couple follow-ups showing the next years in her life. So I'm gonna have to do some research and figure that out. But yep, that's that. All right, if you read it, please let me know. I'd like to talk about it. That's all I got. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.